Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack the complex, the cutting edge, and the truly fascinating. Today, we're plunging into a realm where science fiction is rapidly becoming our reality. Brain-computer interfaces. Imagine for a moment typing a message, piloting a drone, or even consciously influencing your own meditative state, all just by thinking. This isn't some distant dream anymore. It's actually happening right now with BCIs.
And that's precisely why our mission today is so critical, really. This deep dive is all about brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, with a specific focus on Neuralink's groundbreaking advancements. But we're not just here to celebrate the marvels of this technology. We really have to confront the astonishing and sometimes, frankly, unsettling cybersecurity implications that come along with them. Our goal today is to unpack the vulnerabilities of these devices, explore the cutting-edge research revealing how they can be compromised, and discuss the urgent need for robust safeguards to protect what might truly be the last frontier of personal privacy, your own mind.
That's right. It's a huge topic. And to help us navigate this intricate landscape, we've pulled together insights from some of the leading cybersecurity experts in the field, detailed academic research, some chilling real-world examples of medical device hacks, and a groundbreaking study from MIT that I promise you will genuinely surprise you. It certainly surprised me.
Yeah, that MIT study is something else. And before we dive in, we want to extend a huge thank you to our deep dive sponsor, www.quantumsecurity.ai. They are a leader in securing advanced technologies, and their expertise in next-generation cybersecurity is, well, more relevant than ever in this rapidly evolving landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We really have to start with the news that's been making global headlines, right? Just last month, February 2024, Elon Musk announced that Neuralink had successfully implanted its brain-computer interface into a human subject for the very first time.
That's right, a major milestone.
Absolutely, and the reports are incredibly promising. The individual is apparently recovering well, and early signs indicate the device is successfully detecting neuron spikes. For those of you listening, these are essentially the brain's electrical activities, the fundamental language of thought. It's a truly monumental step forward, but it immediately brings with it a whole new set of questions about what comes next.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is the sheer ambition and the technological leap that Neuralink represents. This isn't just a simple sensor. Their device is entirely wireless, comprising a chip that's remarkably small, along with over 1,000 slender, flexible conductors, essentially electrodes that are delicately inserted into the cerebral cortex.
Wow, over 1,000.
Yeah, over 1,000. And this intricate insertion, by the way, is performed by a surgical robot, which just underscores the precision required.
Yeah.
I mean, to give you some scale, a typical BCI might have around, say, 250 electrodes. Neuralink's N1 implant boasts thousands, each roughly the size of a single neuron. This level of granularity in data collection is truly unprecedented and speaks volumes about the sophistication of the device.
So if it's capturing all this neural activity, what's the grand vision? What's it supposed to enable people to do?
Well, at its core, the primary function is to capture those thought patterns associated with movement. The idea is to convert these neural signals directly into actions, like moving a cursor on a screen or generating text, basically enabling control over computers purely through thought.
Like telekinesis, almost.
Sort of, yeah. Musk himself used the analogy of Stephen Hawking communicating faster than anyone using a keyboard, which, vividly illustrates the potential impact for individuals with severe motor impairments. He even gave the initial product a very evocative name, telepathy.
Telepathy. That's certainly a bold name for an initial product. How quickly is this vision moving from concept to reality? Seems incredibly fast.
It's moving at an incredible pace, really. Neuralink received FDA approval for human clinical trials back in May 2023. And by September, they'd already begun recruiting participants, specifically individuals with quadriplegia, for their initial study.
Okay.
Neuralink's long-term ambition, as stated by Musk, is nothing less than to integrate human intelligence with artificial intelligence. That's the big picture. But while that's the grand, almost sci-fi goal, their current, more immediate focus is on developing practical neural keyboards and other tools to empower individuals with paralysis.
Right, focusing on the assistive technology aspect first.
Exactly. It's important to note, though, that this rapid pace and the aggressive pursuit of these objectives have also led to some federal investigations, particularly concerning the deaths of study animals in Neuralink trials and issues related to handling hazardous materials. We mention this simply to provide a balanced view, acknowledging the complexities that come with such cutting-edge, high-stakes innovation.
It's definitely a multifaceted picture, lots of layers, but Neuralink isn't the only player in this game, is it? What does the broader BCI landscape look like beyond this one company?
You're absolutely right to point that out. While Neuralink is certainly grabbing headlines, brain-computer interfaces encompass a much wider array of applications that are already being demonstrated in research. We're talking about devices that allow users to move mouse cursors in 2 dimensions, open applications, or type characters onto a screen just by thinking.
Okay.
And think about prosthetic limbs. Individuals can now, maybe using an EEG headset, control the bending of fingers and elbows. The potential for restoring function and independence is truly transformative.
And it goes beyond just physical control, doesn't it? I seem to recall seeing research about interpreting more complex brain activity, even like abstract thoughts.
You're touching on a critical advancement there. BCIs are becoming increasingly sophisticated at interpreting complex data. Facebook-funded research, for example, demonstrated BCIs capable of decoding simple answers to questions directly from brainwaves.
Wow!
Yeah, and there's even research that has partially reconstructed images of animals from neural activity just based on brainwaves. This ability to interpret movement, speech, and even visual imagery directly from brain signals, it pushes the boundaries of what we thought was possible. We're moving beyond simple commands to maybe a deeper understanding of our internal world.
So if this technology is moving into consumer devices, what does that mean for everyday users? It sounds like it's no longer just confined to specialized medical applications.
That's entirely the case. There's a growing demand for portable user-machine coupling, ways to connect our brains to devices easily. Advancements in lightweight hardware, the precision of surgical robots we mentioned, and the power of AI are making consumer BCIs more and more likely.
We're already seeing some of this, right?
Oh, yeah. We already see existing EEG gaming headsets, like Emotive, EPO-C, and Mindwave. They're available to the public for a few $100s. There are also commercial EEG caps, like smart caps or neurocap devices, being used to monitor emotional state and mental focus.
Right, for wellness or productivity.
Exactly. Even companies like Nissan are exploring EEG-based BCIs to monitor driver focus and even visualize steering intentions in vehicles. It's a clear trend towards integrating this tech into daily life, well beyond just clinical settings.
And as more and more of these brainwave sensors become mainstream, what's the inevitable outcome from a data perspective? That's got to be huge.
This is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit unsettling. The widespread adoption of these devices will create an unprecedented trove of data, just vast amounts of neural information. This enormous data set will, in turn, be available to train machine learning algorithms, which will further enhance human-computer communication.
Okay, so better AI training.
Yes, but the flip side. The ability to mine and interpret these brain biometrics is remarkable for its potential to improve quality of life, sure. But it also threatens to break down the biological barriers between the human mind and, public access by digitizing brainwaves. We're talking about converting our most intimate internal processes into digital information that can be stored, analyzed, and potentially compromised.
Yeah.
It's a massive leap into uncharted territory for our privacy.
The idea of our most intimate internal processes becoming a data trove is, frankly, unsettling is the right word. It immediately makes me wonder, if our very thoughts are digitized, does that mean our brain itself could be vulnerable? Can your brain actually be hacked?
That's no longer a hypothetical question. And it's certainly not confined to science fiction anymore. The concept of a brain-hacked scenario is now a real and, I'd argue, urgent concern. The digitization of brainwaves, while offering immense possibilities, simultaneously opens entirely new frontiers for cybercriminals.
So the threat is different this time.
Completely different. The core threat here is unlike anything we've faced before. Unlike traditional hacking, which might compromise your financial records or personal identity through, credit card numbers or social security, neural hacking could potentially manipulate your emotions, control your decisions, or even fundamentally alter your identity. The stakes, as you can imagine, are extraordinarily high. It shifts the very definition of a cyber attack from your wallet to your very being.
That sounds incredibly alarming. What are the cybersecurity experts saying about this? Are these immediate threats, or are we talking further down the line?
Well, let's look at what some of the leading voices are saying. Roger Grimes, a cybersecurity expert with, 35 years of experience, he's expressed significant concerns about the vulnerability of Neuralink's brain chip to hacking. Now, he acknowledges that currently Neuralink chips aren't explicitly advertised as internet connected, which does reduce some immediate cybersecurity risks.
Okay, so that's a mitigating factor.
It is. For a hacker to compromise them right now, they need to overcome significant hurdles, like understanding a unique operating system. It's
Yeah.
not Windows or iOS, right? Which makes it harder to exploit. Plus, hacking would likely require physical proximity to the chip and specific, really in-depth technical knowledge of its workings.
So even with all those technical barriers, Grimes still sees it as an inevitable vulnerability down the road. What makes him so certain?
He's emphatic that the possibility of hacking cannot be ignored, precisely because of the history with other medical devices. He points to past instances where medical devices were compromised, leading to life-threatening situations, and he questions, why would Neuralink's chip be fundamentally different in principle? While he believes a hack isn't imminent due to those mitigating factors, he issues a stark warning. If a Neuralink hack were to occur, the dangers could be severe, potentially deadly. His concerns really underscore the critical need for robust security measures right from the start.
And what about other experts? Does everyone share this perspective on the sort of inevitable vulnerability?
Alex Laurie, he's a senior vice president at ForgeRock, echoes many of Grimes' concerns, but adds another layer. Laurie emphasizes that Neuralink must implement robust anti-hacking systems from the very beginning. No question. He highlights a crucial design element. Neuralink's current system allows users to control computers via a phone app.
Ah, the app connection.
Exactly. That app establishes a direct link between the brain and external devices. And that link, by its very nature, introduces potential hacking risks, not just within Neuralink itself, but within the controlling app and within the connected computer. It's a chain of potential vulnerabilities.
So the phone app acts as a critical gateway and therefore a potential weak point.
That's a key observation, yeah.
Yeah.
Laurie points out that hackers could manipulate the system to make it appear as though the user is issuing commands. They're not basically spoofing their intentions. Even more concerning, they could gain access to personal medical information or maybe imitate the user's activity history. Now, the extent of physical harm hackers could cause is still uncertain, but Laurie stresses the importance of additional measures to protect user identities, like maybe not using real names associated with the device. He believes that as Neuralink progresses, strong security protocols are likely in place. But he emphasizes that the broader technology ecosystem, phones, computers, networks, must adapt to protect what he calls the extended concept of self, meaning our identity now includes these embedded devices and how they interact online.
When we talk about hacking the brain, it still sounds like something out of a movie. But the truth is, the healthcare industry has already faced terrifying real-world vulnerabilities in devices critical to life itself. This isn't just theoretical. The precedent for medical device hacks is, well, shockingly clear.
You've hit on a really key point there. The precedent is clear and compelling, absolutely. Take former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney, for instance.
Yeah.
Sounds like a thriller plot, but he publicly revealed in a 60 Minutes interview that he had the wireless feature of his implanted defibrillator disabled.
Disabled. Why?
Because he feared it could be hacked. This wasn't a hypothetical concern for him. It was a matter of life and death. And it speaks volumes about the very real dangers we're facing now with BCIs.
And it goes beyond just defibrillators, doesn't it? What about other critical medical devices? Insulin pumps, maybe?
Absolutely. Think about insulin pumps, vital for managing diabetes. At a Black Hat conference back in 2011, a security researcher demonstrated how he could remotely disable an insulin pump. Then, in 2016, Johnson & Johnson themselves reported a vulnerability in their insulin pumps that could lead to unauthorized access and potentially fatal insulin overdoses.
That's terrifying. People rely on those.
Exactly. And the list continues to grow. In 2017, the Department of Homeland Security's ICS CERT found 8 cybersecurity vulnerabilities in Smiths Medical's Medfusion 4000 wireless syringe infusion pumps. The same year, the FDA recalled 465,000 devices from Abbott due to risks of unauthorized programming changes, which included battery depletion and potentially critical failure.
Okay, so infusion pumps, pacemakers.
Defibrillators, yeah. And it doesn't stop there. In 2019, the FDA recalled certain Medtronic MiniMed insulin pumps over vulnerabilities, allowing attackers to modify settings. Also in 2019, a critical flaw was identified in Medtronic heart defibrillators that could enable attackers to manipulate radio communications to change device settings.
So even devices designed explicitly to save lives have proven to be vulnerable to malicious attacks or unintended consequences. It's a clear pattern.
Exactly. And it's not just individual devices sometimes. In 2021, the cybersecurity firm Armis discovered 9 critical vulnerabilities called Poonpiper in pneumatic tube systems.
The tubes in hospitals that send samples around?
Those exact systems. They're used in over 3,000 hospitals worldwide. including most North American hospitals, for transporting lab samples, medications, you name it. These vulnerabilities could allow attacks like taking over the system stations or launching ransomware attacks that could cripple entire hospital operations. So these examples clearly demonstrate that medical devices, despite their critical nature and, stringent safety requirements, have a documented history of being compromised. This makes the cybersecurity concerns surrounding advanced BCIs like Neuralink not just theoretical, but very real and, frankly, very urgent.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and potentially, truly frightening. We're going to take a deep dive into some groundbreaking research from MIT. The title is Brain Hack: Remotely Injecting False Brainwaves with RF to Take Control of a Brain-Computer Interface. This study reveals an entirely new type of threat that I think many hadn't even considered.
What's truly groundbreaking about this MIT research isn't just that they found a vulnerability, but that they exposed a fundamental blind spot in how we've been thinking about BCI security. For years, the focus was largely on protecting the data after it's collected, right? Mm-hmm. Or securing the software. This brain hack just turns that completely on its head. It shows you can directly manipulate the physical hardware of the device from afar using radio frequencies before the data even properly enters the system.
Wow.
It's like finding out your super secure digital safe can be opened just by shining a specific invisible light on its side, not by cracking its code. It shifts the entire paradigm of BCI defense.
So it's not about intercepting what the brain is saying to the device, but rather it's like telling the device what the brain should be saying, injecting thoughts almost.
Yeah, precisely. Injecting fake signals that mimic brainwaves. The implications are profound. This isn't just a theoretical exploit. It's the first time an EEG device has been remotely hacked at this physical layer. This capability means not only can an attacker seize control of a BCI, but it could also lead to severe misdiagnoses in clinical EEG tests, where accuracy is absolutely paramount for patient care. It's a game changer.
Okay, so how does this brain hack actually work? Let's get into the science a bit, because it sounds incredibly sophisticated.
It's surprisingly elegant, actually, in how it exploits fundamental electrical properties. See, EEG devices measure incredibly small brain signals. We're talking tens of microvolts. Tiny. To make these tiny signals usable, the devices employ amplifiers with significant gain, making the signal much stronger. This high sensitivity, designed for detecting subtle neural activity, is precisely what the attack leverages as a weakness.
So their sensitivity makes them vulnerable. How do they actually get the fake signal in?
Right, so the trick exploits how these super-sensitive EEG devices are built to pick up tiny brain signals. Imagine them like highly tuned microphones, designed to hear faint whispers from the brain. The brain hack doesn't try to whisper. Instead, it blasts a specific invisible radio signal, a high-frequency carrier wave that's completely outside what the device is supposed to hear. But because these microphones, the amplifiers, are so sensitive, and maybe a little imperfect in technical terms, nonlinear, they unintentionally process this loud, high-frequency signal. And in doing so, they unravel a hidden, fake brainwave message that was encoded onto that high-frequency signal.
Okay, hang on. So the amplifier itself kind of decodes the fake message from the radio wave.
Exactly. It's like a radio picking up a strong, unexpected hum from somewhere else, and then that hum accidentally plays a song because of how the radio's internal circuits process sound nonlinearly. The EEG device effectively decodes a fake brain signal from raw radio energy, making it believe it's coming directly from your mind.
And where do these radio signals come from? You mentioned the wires. Are the EEG wires themselves acting as antennas?
That's exactly right. The exposed cables linking the EEG electrodes on your scalp to the recording device act as unassuming antennas. Now, brain signal frequencies are very low, tens of hertz, like 1 to 60 hertz maybe. These have wavelengths thousands of kilometers long. So directly sending RF energy at these low frequencies using short EEG cables is practically impossible. The cables are too short to pick them up efficiently.
Right, the antenna isn't big enough.
Exactly. This is where amplitude modulation, or AM, comes in, just like old radio broadcasts.
Ah, like AM radio. So they're encoding a low-frequency brainwave onto a higher-frequency radio wave.
Precisely. The attackers encode the desired low-frequency signal, the fake brainwave, say anything from 1 to 60 hertz, by multiplying it with a much faster oscillating carrier wave, maybe around 300 megahertz or even 500 megahertz for a typical 1-meter cable. This higher-frequency carrier wave can be efficiently captured by the relatively short EEG cables, so you're sending a high-frequency signal that secretly carries the low-frequency information you want to inject.
And then the amplifier, because it's not perfectly linear, it resolves or demodulates that fake brainwave, making it part of the legitimate reading.
Correct. When this amplitude-modulated signal hits that nonlinear amplifier in the EEG device, the modulating frequency of the fake brainwaves is resolved and effectively added to the baseband signal, which is the actual brain activity being measured. What's particularly devious is that even an input EMI filter, which is designed to remove unwanted frequencies, can sometimes be bypassed through this high-frequency coupling effect.
So the injected signal just gets mixed in with the real brainwave reading. How does the BCI even distinguish between the real and fake signals then?
It often can't, especially if the injected signal is powerful enough. If the transmitted power of the injected signal is sufficient, it will simply exceed the power of the user's real neural activity. When this happens, the fake signal effectively obfuscates the true signal. It just swamps it out, forcing the BCI to interpret the fake input as genuine. And this means a relatively low-power, seemingly harmless RF injection can completely fool the system, leading to potentially dangerous misinterpretations.
How low power are we talking?
In their experiments, they used a transmitting power of only 17.4 milliwatts. That's incredibly low, less power than many standard Wi-Fi routers emit continuously. Yet it was still effective within a certain range, and the researchers explicitly noted this range could be easily increased with more transmitting power.
And I remember you saying the researchers even found that the physical setup of the wires matters, like how tangled they are affects the frequency.
Yes, the geometry has an impact. The tangling and position of EEG cables can change the receiving antenna geometry, which influences the optimal carrier frequency for the attack to work best. For one device they tested, the Neuroelectrics Inobio, the optimal range was found to be around 500-550 MHz. This just means an attacker might need to do a quick sweep or calibration to find the sweet spot for a specific setup, but once found, the attack is highly effective.
This sounds like something out of a spy movie, honestly, but you're saying it's built with readily available components, not some exotic military tech.
That's what's truly unsettling, the accessibility of the brain hack system. The components used are surprisingly off the shelf. The system comprises a computer running GNU radio that's an open-source radio toolkit, free to download, used to define the frequencies. This is connected to a software-defined radio, or SDR, like the new Blader F Micro A9. These SDRs are portable, relatively low cost, and definitely consumer available. Hobbyists use them all the time. Then there's a small power amplifier, the new NBT100 Bias T, providing about 8.37 dBs of gain, just to boost the signal a bit. And finally, log periodic antennas, which are PCB-based, so just printed circuit boards, operating in a 400-1000 MHz range. Also widely available. An attacker could assemble this entire system for roughly $400 using open-source platforms and these readily available components.
$400, a DIY dystopia device. That's so great. So it's not just theoretical. They actually demonstrated this in real-world attacks. What kinds of devices did they target? Were they all the same?
No, they successfully applied the attack to 3 different categories of EEG devices, which really demonstrates the versatility and broad applicability of their method. First, a research-grade device, the Neuroelectrics Inobio, which is commonly used in psychology and neuroscience studies, very professional gear. Second, an open-source device, the OpenBCI Ganglion, often used in low-cost BCI applications, like controlling household items or even wheelchairs by hobbyists or researchers on a budget. And third, and this is notable, a consumer-grade device, the Interaxon Muse 2, that's used for meditation neurofeedback. And crucially, the Muse 2 doesn't have exposed cables like the other two, yet it still proved vulnerable.
Wait, they even managed to hack the meditation app, the Muse, without direct cable exposure. That's surprising.
Yeah.
How did they demonstrate the attacks? Let's start with the keyboard one.
Right, the virtual keyboard speller. In this demo, a user intended to type the phrase, "I love MP," on an SSVEP-based speller. Now, an SSVEP speller works by flashing different letters at specific frequencies, and the BCI detects which frequency the user is visually focusing on.
Okay, I think I've seen those.
Yeah. So the attacker, using the brain hack system from a nearby room, even through a closed door, transmitted signals encoded to make the BCI think the user was looking at the letters for hate instead of love. The injected fake wave's power was higher than the user's real brain signal associated with looking at the love letters, effectively overpowering the legitimate signal, and the result. The speller outputted the attacker's desired letters, hate. It's a clear demonstration of direct, malicious control over communication, completely hijacking the user's intent.
That's a direct hijacking of intent. Chilling. What about something with physical consequences, like controlling a drone?
They demonstrated that as well, using the same principles. The brain hack system was used to take complete control of an SSVEP-based drone control interface. While the legitimate user was attempting to maneuver the drone, the attacker remotely activated the emergency stop command by injecting the corresponding fake brain signal. The drone immediately crashed to the ground. This highlights the potential for much greater harm than just crashing a toy drone. Imagine directing it towards people or critical infrastructure. It's a chilling example of real-world kinetic impact from a remote signal injection.
And the meditation app, the Muse, which you mentioned, has no exposed cables. How did they pull that off, and what did it show?
This one really showcased the attack's versatility and how it can affect even consumer wellness devices, which many might assume are lower risk. The Muse device provides real-time feedback on mental states, categorizing them as active, neutral, or calm, often accompanied by sounds like weather or birds. The attacker injected fake delta waves, around 3 Hz, which are typically associated with deep sleep or deep meditation, into the frontal electrode region. And simultaneously, they injected fake theta waves, around 8 Hz, also associated with relaxation, into the temporal electrode region.
So hitting multiple spots with different fake signals at once.
Exactly. Even though the human subject remained with eyes open and had absolutely no intention to meditate, the Muse app suddenly reported a shift from active state to calm state. It even started playing sounds indicative of deep meditation, like birds chirping. This demonstrates the ability to inject multiple frequencies simultaneously and directly manipulate the perceived mental state of the user, fooling the app, even on a device without those obvious exposed antenna-like cables.
So how effective is this attack in terms of range and consistency? Is it easily thwarted by just moving around or being a bit further away?
The study conducted detailed characterization experiments on this. They measured an effective range of up to approximately 3 meters, so about 10 feet. And importantly, the attack was successful even when transmitted through walls, like from an adjacent room through a closed door in their tests.
3 meters through a wall.
Yeah. And what's even more concerning, remember, is the relatively low transmitting power used for these demonstrations, only 17.4 milliwatts. The researchers explicitly state in the paper that the effective range could be easily increased with more transmitting power, suggesting that this 3-meter range is likely a conservative estimate of its potential.
And what about the user moving around? Could that disrupt the attack, maybe change the antenna properties enough?
They tested that too. The attack proved pretty robust to the user's body and head movement. They conducted tests where the user walked away actually, straight back from the antenna, and the injected signal remained detectable and effective. Its power decreased with distance, as you'd expect from physics, but it was still present and measurable. This demonstrates its practical applicability in dynamic environments, not just perfectly controlled static lab setups. They also did statistical analysis, which further showed that the probability of a successful attack, meaning the injected wave amplitude was higher than the real brain waves, was consistently high within that effective range and dropped sharply outside it, confirming the attack's repeatability and reliability.
So repeatable, works through walls, effective even with movement, and achievable with low power and cheap hardware. That's quite a combination.
It is. And the immediate implications are quite stark, as the researchers point out. First, the ability to inject false brainwaves poses a significant risk for misdiagnoses in clinical EEG recordings, which are used for critical medical evaluations, like epilepsy diagnosis. Imagine getting the wrong diagnosis because of RF interference. Second, assistive technologies like wheelchairs or prosthetic limbs controlled by BCIs could be hijacked, stripping individuals of their autonomy and potentially causing serious physical harm. And third, as BCI technology becomes more ubiquitous and integrates with devices like smartphones, there's a clear risk of privacy breaches, where personal information could be revealed or manipulated via these BCI-based interactions. These are not just theoretical concerns. They are direct, actionable threats that this research brings right to the forefront.
It's clear that this technology brings incredible promise, but also these unprecedented risks. When we talk about neural data, what exactly are we referring to? Why is it so fundamentally different from other forms of personal information we already try to protect, like financial or even regular health data?
That's a crucial distinction to make. Neural data, which is information derived directly from the brain and the nervous system, goes far, far beyond traditional personal information like your name, address, or even your general medical history. Think of it, as some researchers have described it, as the digital source code for an individual.
Digital source code?
Yeah. It has the potential to reveal your innermost thoughts, your genuine emotions, maybe even your subconscious intentions or biases. This isn't just about what you explicitly communicate. It includes subtle patterns in EEG readings, intricate details in fMRI scans. And looking forward, capabilities like decoding neural data directly into speech, potentially detecting truthfulness, or maybe even creating a digital clone of someone's personality based on their neural patterns.
So it's not just data about us, it is us in a way digitized. That sounds incredibly intimate, almost violating.
In many ways, yes. It's uniquely intimate. Think about it this way. Genetic data, or fingerprints, tell us about our external selves, what we look like, our physical predispositions, maybe. Neural data tells us about our internal selves, what we are thinking and feeling at a truly fundamental level. There's a powerful quote from a scholar on this. They said, "I already don't want my employer or insurance company to know my genome. As to my brainome, I don't want anyone to know it for any purpose whatsoever. It is my most intimate identity." That really highlights the profound difference and the uniquely sensitive nature of this information.
Given this extraordinary level of intimacy, what are the potential applications across different fields, and what are the stakes if this brainome data falls into the wrong hands or gets misused?
The applications are vast, truly spanning across multiple sectors. Medically, it could revolutionize things like predicting epileptic seizures before they happen, treating paralysis as Neuralink aims to do, managing mental health conditions like depression or anxiety with targeted neurofeedback. For consumers, we're already seeing quadriplegic individuals playing video games using their thoughts. The potential for drivers to control smart devices in their car with thought alone is on the horizon, commercially. Well, imagine advertising tailored not just to clicks, but to your genuine subconscious emotional engagement measured directly from your brain. Or improving workplace productivity by monitoring employee focus levels. Or tailoring educational experiences based on a student's actual mental state and attention. Even in public safety, it could potentially detect fatigue in pilots or truck drivers, maybe aid law enforcement investigations in some way, or even identify individuals through unique neural activity patterns, like a brain fingerprint.
Those are truly transformative uses, promising incredible advances in health, convenience, efficiency, even safety. But the other side of that coin must be the immense vulnerability, right?
Precisely. These extraordinary promises come with an equally critical need for robust safeguards. Because neural data, due to its highly personal and revealing nature, is profoundly vulnerable to misuse. This could manifest through unchecked commercialization, leading to exploitation of our thoughts for profit, or through discrimination based on inferred mental states. Imagine being denied insurance or a job based on a predicted predisposition to anxiety detected from your brainwaves. And of course, there's the ever-present threat of privacy breaches, where our brainome could be exposed in ways we can barely comprehend right now, leading to truly unprecedented risks to personal autonomy and identity.
This brings us to some very deep ethical dilemmas, doesn't it? If our thoughts can be accessed, analyzed, maybe even manipulated, it strikes right at the core of what it means to be human, our sense of self.
It absolutely does. The first major ethical dilemma is cognitive privacy. If neural data is compromised, it goes far beyond financial loss. It strikes at the core of personal identity. This raises profound ethical questions about who owns our thoughts, who consents to their access, and how could this data be misused by hackers, corporations, or even governments? It's about protecting the sanctity of our inner world, our mental sanctuary, if you will.
And what about our ability to act freely, our autonomy?
That's the second critical dilemma, the threat to autonomy. BCIs are fundamentally designed to empower users, especially those with disabilities, by restoring function or enabling new forms of interaction. That's the promise. However, if these devices can be hacked, as the MIT study showed is possible, that very empowerment could be stripped away. Imagine a scenario where a prosthetic limb or a communication device is hijacked, leaving the user powerless, or worse, forced to act against their will. Think back to that drone example. The ethical implications of such incidents demand urgent attention and preventative measures because true control and independence are fundamentally at stake.
And the potential for darker applications. You mentioned the dual-use nature earlier.
That's the third and perhaps most chilling dilemma, the potential weaponization of BCIs. This technology, like many powerful technologies, has a dual-use nature. While it offers immense therapeutic and assistive benefits, it could also be exploited for harmful purposes. We're talking about potential misuse by governments or malicious non-state actors for enhanced surveillance, coercion, psychological manipulation, or even in extreme future scenarios, as tools in warfare. Establishing clear boundaries for their ethical and permissible use becomes absolutely essential before we find ourselves too far down that path.
And finally, there's this concern that these advanced security measures might not be equally accessible to everyone. This point about inequality in security, where maybe only the wealthy can afford the most secure BCI tech, that feels incredibly resonant given today's digital divides. What does that truly mean for cognitive autonomy across different socioeconomic strata?
It's not just a potential divide, it's a truly chilling prospect where your ability to truly own your mind, your cognitive liberty, becomes a luxury good. Imagine a scenario where cheaper mass-market BCIs, perhaps those designed for wellness tracking or gaming, like the Muse, become hotbeds for invasive data harvesting or even subtle manipulation because they lack the robust, expensive safeguards built into high-end medical implants. This could easily create a kind of neuro-underclass, constantly vulnerable to profiling, targeted influence campaigns, or even more direct exploitation, while others with more resources remain shielded behind better technology. It fundamentally redefines equality in the digital age, creating a new, terrifying dimension of vulnerability based not just on economic standing, but on the very integrity of your inner self. It really underscores the need for universal baseline standards and accessible, robust security for all BCI devices, not just for a privileged few.
So we've identified these profound risks and deep ethical dilemmas. Now, how are our legal and regulatory frameworks actually keeping up with this incredibly fast-moving technology? It sounds like, maybe predictably, they're lagging significantly behind.
They absolutely are lagging. The rapid development of neurotechnologies has significantly outpaced existing regulatory frameworks across most jurisdictions globally. The classic problem with emerging tech. Most current data laws, even comprehensive ones like the GDPR in Europe, haven't clearly or explicitly covered neural data by name. They might cover biometric or health data, but the unique aspects of neural data often fall into a gray area, leaving a significant gap in protection for this uniquely sensitive information.
But some places are starting to make moves, particularly in the U.S. at the state level, right? I think Colorado was mentioned.
Yes, exactly. The U.S. states are actually pioneering some of these efforts, which is interesting. Colorado became the first U.S. state to explicitly include neural data under its definition of sensitive personal information in its comprehensive privacy law, the Colorado Privacy Act, back in 2024. This is a significant step. It imposes pretty stringent obligations on businesses handling this data. For example, obtaining explicit, informed, specific, affirmative, and unambiguous consent for neural data collection. That's a high bar.
Explicit, informed, specific, affirmative, unambiguous. That's a lot more detail than the usual click here to agree check boxes we see everywhere else.
Precisely. It aims for much more meaningful consent. Businesses also have to regularly refresh consent every 24 months, or provide a user-controlled interface for opting out, ensuring ongoing user control, not just a one-time click. They must post a clear privacy notice detailing data use, retention, disclosure purposes, and they are specifically prohibited from using dark patterns, those deceptive interfaces designed to trick users into agreeing. They also have to inform individuals of third parties to whom data is sold, and delete or de-identify data when it's no longer necessary or when consent is withdrawn. The law insists that only data reasonably necessary or compatible with stated purposes can be collected, and it grants individuals rights to access, correct, delete, and opt out of sales or targeted advertising or automated decisions based on their neural data. Plus, companies have to conduct data protection assessments, prohibit unlawful discrimination based on neural data, and take reasonable measures to secure the data.
That sounds quite comprehensive for a first step. Are there any catches?
Well, there is one noted ambiguity. Colorado's definition of biological data currently limits neural data protection to when it's used for identification purposes. This leaves some questions about broader applications of neural data that might not be used for direct identification, like inferring emotional states or cognitive performance. So it's a great start, but maybe not perfectly comprehensive yet.
And what about California? They often lead on privacy legislation.
California is also moving forward, yes. Its comprehensive privacy law, the CCPA, also classified neural data as sensitive personal information in 2024. But their approach differs from Colorado's in a key way. Rather than requiring that high bar of initial explicit consent, California gives individuals a limited right to opt out of the collection and use of their sensitive data, including neural data. On the other hand, California's law is broader in scope in some ways as it applies to employee data in addition to consumer data. So you see different mechanisms emerging opt-in versus opt-out, but both states recognizing the unique sensitivity of this data and attempting to provide some level of specific protection.
Okay, so state-level action in the U.S. What's happening in Europe, given GDPR's strong stance on privacy in general?
In the European Union, while GDPR doesn't specifically address neural data by name, It predates much of this becoming mainstream. Its existing provisions for biometric data and health data likely apply. Neural data collected for BCIs or health monitoring would almost certainly qualify as special categories of personal data under GDPR. This classification demands heightened safeguards, including things like explicit consent and greater transparency about processing. There was also a joint report by the Spanish Data Protection Authority and the European Data Protection Supervisor highlighting concerns about the accuracy, fairness, and proportionality of neural data processing under existing EU laws, urging businesses to carefully assess these factors.
And the new EU AI Act, does that touch on this?
It does, indirectly. The EU's recently adopted AI Act covers neural data by regulating emotion recognition systems that rely on biometric data, which would include EEG data. It even includes specific prohibitions on using such systems in workplaces and educational institutions, except for very specific medical or safety reasons. So it's starting to carve out specific restrictions based on the application of the inferred data.
And South America's making some groundbreaking moves on this front too, aren't they? Chile, specifically.
They're actually leading the charge on establishing explicit neural rights in law. Chile became the very first country in the world back in 2021 to amend its constitution to explicitly protect neural rights. This enshrines mental privacy and cognitive integrity as fundamental human rights within their constitution. It's a very significant, principled step at the highest legal level.
A constitutional right to mental privacy. Wow, has that been tested?
Yes, it led to a landmark Chilean Supreme Court ruling in August 2023 against the neurotechnology company, Emotive, one of the companies whose headsets are widely used. The court ordered Emotive to delete the plaintiff's stored neural data and subjected its products sold in Chile to strict pre-commercialization assessments by Chilean health authorities, a major enforcement action. However, it's worth noting that the court did not fully support the plaintiff's specific claim to force Emotive to modify its global privacy policies. This reflects some of the limitations of using a purely human rights-based protection when it comes to dictating specific, detailed data processing practices of a global company. It sets a powerful principle, but the detailed regulatory mechanisms are still evolving.
Interesting. And what about the UK and broader international efforts beyond Chile and the EU?
In the UK, the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, published a report in 2023 emphasizing the risks associated with neurotech, like data accuracy issues, transparency challenges, and the potential for discrimination, particularly with AI-powered neurotechnologies. They urged a precautionary approach. On a broader global scale, UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, appointed an expert group in August 2024. Their task is to prepare a new global standard on the ethics of neurotechnology. This framework is planned for adoption by UNESCO member states in November 2025 and aims to ensure that the development and use of neurotechnologies complies with international human rights standards, so a move towards global ethical guidelines.
So we're seeing this patchwork of efforts emerge, constitutional amendments in one country, state-level laws with different approaches in the U.S., existing frameworks being adapted in the EU, and international bodies working on ethical guidelines. It sounds like navigating this complex, fragmented, and rapidly evolving regulatory environment for uniquely sensitive neural data is a significant challenge for any company working in this space.
It absolutely is a huge challenge. And this is precisely where cutting-edge cybersecurity becomes non-negotiable, not just a nice-to-have. This is where our sponsor, www.quantumsecurity.ai, really comes into the picture. Their expertise offers the advanced, proactive security solutions needed to meet and even exceed these evolving compliance thresholds. Safeguarding the most critical information, our literal thoughts and brain patterns in this increasingly regulated, high-stakes world requires next-generation cybersecurity. They are at the forefront of providing that, especially given how quickly the legal landscape is trying and often struggling to catch up.
Okay, now that we understand the nascent and at times fragmented legal landscape, it's time to really dig into the actual loopholes that exist, because even with these new laws starting to appear, there are still significant gaps that could leave our brainomes vulnerable. Let's start with consent. It seems like the traditional agree once and forget model is just fundamentally broken for neural data.
That's absolutely right. The traditional model of static consent, where you tick a box once when you install an app or start using a service, is completely insufficient for neural data. It just doesn't work. This is mainly due to the uncertain future uses and the sheer ease with which this incredibly rich data can be repurposed for things the user never imagined. For instance, Users of a wellness app might give ambiguous consent without fully realizing their raw brain data could be used down the line to train powerful AI algorithms for completely different purposes, something far beyond the initial stated function of helping the meditator focus.
And there's also this concept you mentioned earlier of data exhaust when it comes to BCIs. What does that mean for our privacy? How does that create a loophole?
Right, data exhaust. This refers to the large amount of BCI-generated data that might be technically superfluous to the direct core operation of the device itself at that moment. It's extra data being generated. This excess data could potentially bypass regulations like GDPR if it's not explicitly covered by the initial consent's stated purpose. It creates a loophole where vast amounts of sensitive neural information could be collected, stored, and analyzed without clear oversight or justification under the original agreement. It's like a detailed digital footprint of your internal cognitive processes that gets left behind constantly and can be swept up and used later.
So even with current data laws that have purpose limitation clauses, rules meant to restrict how data can be used beyond its original purpose, it's still not enough protection for neural data.
Not really, no. Current data laws often have these purpose limitation clauses, but they frequently contain broad exceptions or vague language. They might allow for processing deemed compatible with the original purpose, or for implicit optimization, where data collected for one function might be repurposed for another without requiring fresh, explicit consent. This is particularly problematic for, say, neurologically impaired individuals who might struggle to understand complex one-time consent forms in the first place, and it's also an issue for what's sometimes called collateral data processing analysis that happens in the background without the user's explicit knowledge or active input. It just leaves too much room for interpretation and potential misuse, especially with data as intensely personal as brain activity.
And this then leads directly to the risk of unintended sharing, right? Even without explicit consent for that sharing.
Indeed. We're all familiar with practices like pre-checked boxes and vaguely worded clauses implying consent for third-party sharing in the digital world. We see it all the time. With AI's power to analyze and infer deep insights from neural data, this information could be disclosed to unintended parties, sometimes with serious ethical ramifications. Consider the controversial example reported where a primary school allegedly used brain-tracking headsets on students during lessons. The data was reportedly transferred to a company server, and maybe even to teachers, without explicit parental consent for that specific transfer and use. Even where opt-out rights exist, like in California, continuously monitoring how your complex BCI data streams are being used and shared by third parties is incredibly difficult for an average user, and rights like erasure or deletion often don't have retroactive effect, meaning once the data is shared or used to train a model, it's very hard, maybe impossible, to fully pull it back.
Okay, moving on from consent, another major loophole seems to be the vague and often broad exceptions carved out for scientific research in many data laws. How does that impact BCI data specifically?
This is a significant concern, yes. Many data laws, including GDPR, provide quite broad exceptions for activities classified as scientific research. These exceptions can exempt organizations from general prohibitions on processing sensitive data, and even from strict purpose limitation requirements. The core problem is there's often no clear, restrictive definition in the law of what constitutes legitimate scientific research. Is commercial R&D included? Where's the line? This ambiguity is particularly troubling in the BCI industry, where scientific research is highly technology-propelled and often deeply entangled with commercial activities and goals. Private companies could potentially appeal to a broad research exemption to process vast amounts of brain data, even for purposes that might indirectly or even directly benefit their commercial interests down the line.
So a company could potentially collect huge amounts of neural data under the banner of research and then use the insights or even the trained algorithms for commercial gain without needing that strict, ongoing, specific consent we talked about.
That's precisely the risk. The lack of transparency here can be profound. Many neurotechnology companies' privacy policies mention sharing de-identified or anonymized EEG data with research affiliates or partners. But often, there are no clear definitions of what de-identified truly means in the context of rich neural data, or strict, verifiable guarantees of robust anonymization techniques. This leaves a wide, uncertain space for unconsented uses, where data collected for one seemingly benign research purpose could be repurposed for something entirely different, like developing commercial biomarkers or training advertising algorithms without the user's knowledge or explicit renewed consent. It's a gaping loophole for ethical data handling.
And what about this non-personal neural data itself? If data is truly anonymized or de-identified, shouldn't it be safe from privacy breaches, or is that another loophole?
Not necessarily safe, no. This is another major challenge, the issue of supposedly non-personal neural data. Even anonymized or de-identified neural data faces a very real and growing possibility of re-identification, especially with advancing AI techniques and the ability to cross-reference it with other data sets. Neural data is just so rich and unique to an individual. This poses risks for what are called sensitive inferences about individuals' mental states, health conditions, or personality traits, even if the data itself doesn't directly identify them by name at first glance. It's incredibly difficult, some argue maybe impossible, to guarantee true and permanent anonymization with such rich, high-dimensional data.
So companies can share this supposedly anonymized data freely, maybe arguing it's not personal data anymore, but that could still lead to issues for groups of people or even re-identification later.
Often, yes. Companies frequently state in their policies that they can share de-identified or aggregated data without restriction. While this might seem harmless, it can lead to discrimination and stigmatization at the group level, for example, based on behavioral patterns inferred from the aggregated neural data of certain demographics, like age groups or people with certain conditions. This type of group-level data can influence profiling and automated decision-making for commercial targeting, social sorting, or even political manipulation, even if it's not tied back to a specific identified individual. It essentially allows for the classification and potential manipulation of groups based on their collective brainome characteristics.
And what about when this data, personal or supposedly non-personal, crosses borders, given how interconnected our tech world is?
That's another significant gap. Regulations for the cross-border transfer of non-personal data are generally nascent and highly fragmented globally. This creates potential loopholes, as neural data that might be considered non-personal and less regulated in one jurisdiction could be freely transferred to another country with weaker rules and then potentially re-identified or used in ways that would not be permitted where it originated. It's a global data flow problem with very patchy local regulatory responses, creating inconsistent protection for users worldwide.
Okay, moving to perhaps the most direct concern for many listeners, the urgent need for special, heightened cybersecurity measures. BCIs seem to introduce entirely new attack vectors, don't they? Like the MIT study showed.
They absolutely do. BCIs introduce entirely new cybersecurity risks, including uncontrolled remote access, unexpected physical layer attacks like the RF injection, manipulation of control outputs. These risks are often aggravated by the widespread use of cloud computing for data processing and storage, and the current lack of standardized interoperability and security protocols between diverse BCI devices and cloud platforms. The field of BCI-specific cybersecurity is really not yet mature. It's still developing. And this creates wide-open opportunities for attackers who are often ahead of the defenders.
And you mentioned Neuralink-specific tech might have unique vulnerabilities.
Yes. For example, Neuralink's use of nanotechnology, miniaturizing electrodes for brain implantation down to the scale of neurons, while amazing technologically, might present specific vulnerabilities. Researchers have theorized about attacks like neuronal flooding, FLO, or neuronal scanning, SEA. These are advanced theoretical attacks for now, but they aim to directly disrupt neural networks or affect neural activity within the brain itself by manipulating the implant's nanoscale components, potentially causing real cognitive harm or manipulation.
And current security regulations or standard practices just aren't sufficient for these new, incredibly sophisticated threats.
Unfortunately, no. Current regulatory systems often lack specific mandated measures for these novel risks. Things like data protection impact assessments, DPIAs, which are meant to evaluate risk before deployment, are often self-conducted by the companies themselves and subject to relatively weak external supervision or enforcement. Standards for reasonable security are often vague and apply generally to all data, not specifically tailored to the unique vulnerabilities and catastrophic potential consequences of compromised BCIs. Even new, more specific regulations like the EU Cyber Resilience Act, while a positive step for digital product security generally, apply broadly and don't yet provide detailed BCI-specific technical security mandates. And in practice, a review of the industry showed that relatively few neurotech companies currently use robust end-to-end encryption for neural data. And even when data is encrypted, it's often still accessible in decrypted form to the company's own employees or back-end systems, with Apple, interestingly, being noted as a rare exception and publicly promising that user health data, including potentially neural data from connected devices, is encrypted in a way that not even Apple itself can access it.
That lack of mandated, specific, strong security is deeply concerning. This seems like a perfect example of where advanced cybersecurity providers are absolutely critical, not optional.
Indeed. It highlights that we absolutely need to move beyond vague standards like reasonable security and implement robust BCI responsive cybersecurity frameworks by mandate. This is precisely where cutting-edge solutions become mandatory. Companies like our sponsor, www.quantumsecurity.ai, are at the forefront of developing and deploying the advanced technical measures like advanced encryption, anomaly detection tailored for neural signals, secure hardware design principles that are crucial for protecting the very integrity of our minds. They are building solutions that proactively address these unique BCI vulnerabilities, aiming to secure our neural frontier.
Another loophole you touched on seems to be the lack of clear ethical guidance and critically pre-market review, specifically for consumer BCI devices. What's the core issue here when so many profound ethical questions remain unanswered?
The problem is really twofold here. First, current ethical considerations for neurotechnology, while developing, are often still preliminary and lack what some experts call additional gradation. They don't always distinguish adequately between the different sensitivities of various types of neural data. For example, the ethical considerations for general EEG data used for simple control might be different from those for decoding complex emotions, inner speech, or sensitive health predispositions. But this nuance isn't always captured in current guidelines or regulations. Second, and perhaps more importantly, there's a significant oversight gap. Formal ethical reviews, like those conducted by institutional review boards, IRBs, often under FDA oversight in the U.S., typically apply only to clinical or medical devices intended for treatment or formal research involving patients. Non-invasive, recreational, or educational BCIs, the kind you might buy online for gaming, meditation, or focus training, are often treated simply as consumer electronic devices. As such, they face almost no oversight regarding their data practices or ethical implications, despite their increasing capabilities for decoding and inferring highly sensitive neural data. This creates a massive regulatory blind spot, where highly intimate brain information can be collected, processed, and potentially misused by consumer tech companies without the robust ethical scrutiny given to medical devices.
And finally, threading through all of this is the challenge of international frameworks. Technology is global, data flows across borders instantly, but laws are often local or regional, creating a fragmented landscape for what feel like they should be universal rights concerning our own minds.
That's the persistent hurdle, absolutely. While incredibly difficult politically and logistically, achieving international frameworks with real legal force is absolutely essential in the long run, precisely because of the global nature of technology development, corporate operations, and data transfer. Efforts like UNESCO's ethics recommendation are important first steps, as we mentioned, setting norms and principles. But ultimately, these are soft laws guidelines without teeth. They need to evolve into binding regulatory rules or be incorporated into national laws consistently to provide meaningful, universal protection for neural data across borders. Without that global coordination, we risk a fragmented, inconsistent, and ultimately insufficient global defense against these profound emerging threats to our cognitive liberty and mental privacy.
So we've laid out the challenges, the loopholes, the scary precedents. Now let's pivot to solutions. What are the concrete recommendations to pave the path forward for a secure future with BCIs, acknowledging they're likely here to stay?
Okay, based on the research and expert analysis, our first and perhaps most fundamental recommendation is to strengthen consent procedures, enabling dynamic monitoring. Given the unique evolving sensitivity of neural data, dynamic consent is paramount. It has to be, especially when data is repurposed for new uses or shared with third parties beyond the initial interaction. Future data laws must require detailed, item-by-item notice for all planned uses and all specific third parties with whom data will be shared. This needs to be displayed prominently in clear, understandable language, no legalese buried in page 50. And crucially, any changes to these uses or sharing practices must trigger a new, explicit notice and require fresh consent. The vague compatibility standard found in some current data laws allowing repurposing without new consent, that should be explicitly excluded for neural data. Period.
So instead of a one-time agreement buried in terms and conditions, it becomes an ongoing, active relationship between the user and their data, giving them continuous granular control.
Exactly. We need to mandate dynamic consent, DC mechanisms. These systems would allow users to continuously review and alter their consent preferences easily. Imagine a dashboard where you can see exactly how your BCI data is being used, who it's being shared with, and toggle permissions on or off in real time. This could involve real-time notifications for new BCI connections or data uses, prominent reconsent options for any policy changes, and granular settings for users to control specific purposes and specific third parties. This dynamic control is absolutely fundamental to empowering individuals in the age of neural data. And importantly, it relies on building secure auditable systems in the back end, something that advanced cybersecurity providers are key to developing and implementing reliably.
What's the next key recommendation, especially thinking back to those worryingly broad research exceptions that seem like such a potential loophole?
Our second recommendation directly addresses that. We need to define and limit the scope of the research exception. If research is going to be allowed as an exception for processing sensitive neural data without full consent, it must be clearly and restrictively defined in the law. Ideally, this definition should exclude activities directly linked to commercial product development or proprietary commercial purposes. If there are research projects that genuinely contribute to public interest, but do have commercial elements, they should undergo mandatory independent ethical review by expert committees before they begin. These reviews should follow clear frameworks, perhaps like California's focus on whether the research contributes to public or peer-reviewed scientific knowledge and adheres to applicable ethics rules. This would help prevent commercial exploitation hiding under the guise of vague research, ensuring true scientific integrity and public trust.
Okay, tighten up research rules. Now, what about the non-personal neural data we discussed, the de-identified or aggregated data that might still pose re-identification or group harm risks?
Right. Our third recommendation is to enhance regulations specifically for non-personal neural data. This is often overlooked. Certain kinds of non-personal neural data, for instance, aggregated data derived from specific vulnerable groups, or data with a high demonstrated potential for re-identification using AI, should perhaps be subject to security review or oversight by data protection authorities, not just data held by public bodies. We also need to consider legally prohibiting the use of inferences derived from brain data in ways that could foreseeably harm data subjects. This includes prohibiting attempts to re-identify health data back to specific individuals from supposedly anonymized data sets. Furthermore, looking bigger picture, we should seriously consider establishing a distinct regulatory system for important or critical non-personal data at an international level, maybe similar in concept to China's data security laws categories, to better control cross-border transfers and prevent regulatory arbitrage where sensitive non-personal neural data flows to jurisdictions with weaker protections.
That sounds like a significant regulatory lift, defining and managing critical non-personal data. And then bring us back to the core technology, the critical piece regarding the security itself. What specific technical measures need to be mandated?
That brings us to our fourth and arguably most vital recommendation from a technical standpoint, to mandate additional specific cybersecurity measures for BCIs. We can't rely on voluntary best practices or vague reasonableness standards here. We need to integrate robust technical measures into BCI devices right from the earliest design stages, making privacy and security by design and by default a mandatory standard practice, not just a buzzword. This includes mandating enhanced state-of-the-art encryption for all BCI devices, whether they're medical grade or consumer gadgets. This should utilize advanced cryptographic methods like homomorphic encryption, which amazingly lets you perform calculations on data while it's still encrypted, so the raw neural data itself never has to be revealed to the processor.
Wow, okay. Encrypted computation.
It's exactly. Or techniques like secure multi-party computing, SMC, where calculations are distributed across multiple parties so no single party sees all the data, and differential privacy, which adds statistical noise to datasets to protect individual identities while still allowing for aggregate analysis. These advanced techniques are needed to protect data even during processing, not just at rest or in transit.
So, encryption that protects data even while it's being actively used, that sounds like the kind of groundbreaking tech needed here?
Precisely. We also need to mandate technical measures that prevent unauthorized access to raw neural data by anyone other than the user themselves. This includes preventing access by the BCI operating company's own employees, unless it's absolutely indispensable for a specifically consented core function, and even then, exploring methods like on-device edge processing or strict end-to-end encryption where the company holds no decryption keys. Beyond encryption, we must introduce BCI responsive security frameworks. This could involve things like distributed computation architectures, decentralized data sharing models using technologies like blockchain for tracking data access and consent provenance, or privacy-preserving machine learning techniques like federated learning, where AI models learn from decentralized data held on users' devices without the raw data ever leaving the device. These advanced architectures are designed to resist sophisticated privacy attacks.
This really feels like the bedrock of future BCI safety, the technical guarantees.
It is. And implementing these mandates requires deep technical expertise. This is, again, where companies like our sponsor, www.quantumsecurity.ai, are essential. They are uniquely positioned to provide these sophisticated, future-proof cybersecurity solutions designed to ensure the integrity and confidentiality of neural data against even the most advanced threats, including potential future threats from quantum computing breaking current encryption standards. They are absolutely essential partners in building truly resilient and trustworthy BCI ecosystems.
Okay, so strong technical mandates. Now, moving beyond just the security aspect, what about the devices themselves before they even reach consumers or patients? Right now, you highlighted a significant gap for non-medical consumer devices.
Right. So our fifth recommendation is to establish a mandatory pre-market review procedure for all BCI devices. This means a comprehensive oversight process, going beyond existing ethical reviews for research or safety reviews for medical devices, should be established for every type of BCI device intended for public use. This explicitly includes non-medical consumer products, like gaming or wellness headsets, and even BCI-related R&D activities happening outside of formal clinical contexts if they involve human data. This pre-market review should center on assessing data privacy and security risks based on specialized ethical guidance developed specifically for the nuances of neural data we discussed. The goal is to ensure that all devices, even seemingly innocuous recreational ones, meet high privacy and security standards before they hit the market and start collecting sensitive brain information from potentially millions of users.
Close that consumer device loophole. And finally, pulling all of this together on a global scale. We keep coming back to this. We need more than just scattered national laws for a truly global technology.
Absolutely. Our sixth and final recommendation is to promote international frameworks for universal ethics guidelines and baseline protections. While legally binding international treaties, specifically on neural rights, might be challenging to achieve quickly, actively encouraging international instruments like declarations, resolutions, and soft laws focused on the ethical principles of neural data protection is essential to build consensus. Citing and building upon existing frameworks like the Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights can provide universally accepted basic principles for this special protection. The aim is to foster a global consensus on how we ethically handle the most intimate data imaginable, creating pressure for national laws to align towards strong common standards.
Wow. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've taken a really deep dive into the incredible, sometimes unnerving world of brain-computer interfaces. From Neuralink's cutting-edge implants hitting the headlines to that astonishing MIT research showing how easily these devices can potentially be manipulated at a fundamental hardware level. The implications for our privacy, our autonomy, even our very thoughts and sense of self are just immense. We're moving rapidly into a future where our brainome might become as exposed or even more exposed than our online browsing history.
But as we've explored, the inevitability of vulnerabilities doesn't mean we're powerless. It's not a foregone conclusion that this ends badly. The legal and ethical landscapes are beginning to shift, albeit perhaps too slowly for some. Pioneering research is pointing the way toward comprehensive safeguards, things like dynamic consent mechanisms, and the kind of robust, specific cybersecurity measures that are tailored to the unique nature of neural data. The solutions are being conceived.
So it leaves us with this really provocative thought, doesn't it? What will it truly mean for us, for society, when our most intimate thoughts are no longer solely and securely our own? How far are we willing to go, individually and collectively, to protect that last, most personal frontier of privacy? And what responsibilities do the innovators creating these technologies, the regulators trying to keep pace, and indeed all of us as individuals share in shaping this future responsibly? It's a question that demands our urgent attention and ongoing dialogue.
And as these powerful technologies continue to evolve at breakneck speed, staying ahead of the emerging threats requires the most advanced security capabilities available. Like those offered by our sponsor, www.quantumsecurity.ai. We really encourage you to explore their cutting-edge solutions at www.quantumsecurity.ai to understand how companies like theirs are working on the front lines, helping to build a more secure future for all of us, even, incredibly, within the privacy of our own minds.